on the topic, I'll speak for a while on the topic itself. Changing gears, shifting towards a modern data protection strategy now, that has, in a way, it becomes very insignificant in no time. Data protection strategies are very dynamic. What is going to happen in the next 6 months, we don't know today. And how will this goalpost move to a new goalpost? How will the strategies be redefined, reworked? At this point in time, it is very difficult to predict. Said that leading causes of data breaches are hacking, skimming, or phishing. I think everybody will agree to that. There may be a few more reasons to breaches, but primarily these three, which account for more than half the data breaches, followed by email or internet attacks and employee error. Feel they suffered a data breach due to an insider threat and confirmed they had a DLP solution in place at the time of intrusion. Insider threats from current and departing employees caused data breaches, and legacy solutions fell short in getting the job done.
The first thing I'll say is, in the last 7 years, $1 trillion has been spent on cybersecurity software globally by you. And on behalf of my family, thank you very much. $1 trillion in 7 years. My question to you is, in the last 7 years, do you feel any safer on the internet for the $1 trillion that's been spent? And I would like to pose a hypothesis to you. The hypothesis is that cybersecurity is not working. It's not working. There's a 95% success rate right now for the hackers. Let's face it. Now, the next thing that happened towards the millennium was the age of information. So we moved from infrastructure security to information security. And this is where we started looking at the value of information and the realization that PCs and computers were not what was valuable, but it was the data that was valuable. And I can remember arguing with CIOs in, shall I say, 1999, 2001 timeframe, that the value of the information was going to become more important than the value of the infrastructure that they put in. And I can remember those days when you got a new laptop, it was like gold. And it was an amazing thing, Nowadays, if you lose this, it's no problem. It's the information that's more valuable. Isn't that amazing that in 20 years, our thinking has changed to the fact that this is just a utility. It's just what's inside it is what's really important. So the age of information became really key. And inside that age of information, we saw technology like DLP, and we saw things like encryption becoming massively important. How many of you remember PGP? And the arguments about that. I met the gentleman who wrote PGP. He had tremendous problems with the US government because of the export of those algorithms at the time, and the journey that these people went on in terms of their, because it was seen as such an important technology at the time. Would you believe it that now in some of the Fortune 500 companies, they are switching off their security operations centers because they've become defunct? The security operations centers now are great for forensics, but they're not stopping bad things happening. They're not stopping bad things happening. And when I look at the fourth and current age of cybersecurity is what we call human behavioral cybersecurity. So based on human behavior as opposed to analytics, specifically on systems. And I would argue with you that the human has become the center of cyber security. Why? Well, let's go back to infrastructure security. When companies designing next generation firewalls, what did they do? They started to go up the stack, and they got to layer 7, right? Where they could start to become application aware. So they were going north-south and east-west in the way that they analyze data, and it became quite useful for a while. I'm not talking about layer 7 anymore. I tell you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about layer 8. Layer 8 in the stack is you, is me.
Human layer.
It's the human layer. And that's where the real problems start and finish. Now, I'm sure you've looked at the reports about data breaches. At the end of the day, ForcePoint is a data protection company because data is what it's all about. You know, if it's not humans, it's data. So when you talk cyber, critical national infrastructure, if electricity is shut down or there's a water crisis, it will affect humans. If you lose your bank account information or your money, it's data. Okay, so it's one of the two, humans or data. So when these two things collide, that we have a challenge. So so for us, when we look at this, what we're trying to do is create an environment where we can start to analyze the correlation between the two and how the two are working together. And I would say, as I said, humans are becoming the center of the network. And I would argue with you that systems management needs to change. So three types of threats on your network. The first is the insider, the person who's doing their job and accidentally loses data for you. The second is the insider on your network who maliciously takes away data because they hate your company or they have a problem. And the third is the hacker who's in there because they're trying to break into your systems. I would argue with you that right now they are in your network already. The concept of keeping people out is an old concept. They are in your network right now.
One common challenge which comes across everywhere is that how we balance our digital transformation, digitizing, or technology, or business initiatives with cyber risk. Because apparently both are going into different directions. And the subtext is how we make security more user-friendly. So wouldn't it be wonderful if we have a dynamic policy which is based on the individual risk profile, and it changes when the individual's security posture is changed? That's a direction ForcePoint has taken.
Can you move left of bang? We call that bang when the data leaves. Can you move left of bang? And the only way to move left of bang is to take the AI or the ML, this analytics, and automate it into DLP and automate it into the insider threat technology so that you can block somebody before the data leaves.
Yeah.
And then that becomes a help desk issue. Obviously, you have somebody phoning. But someone said to me, what if it's a minister or if it's the CEO of a company and they get blocked on Saturday and they phone up the CIO and they say, I've been blocked. What's going on? How cool would it be for the CIO to phone him back 2 hours later and say, sir or ma'am, you were blocked because there was somebody else on the network using your credentials and we just saved your reputation. Now it's no longer a problem, but it's a thank you.
Yeah.
And the behavioral analytics, for example, is designed in such a way that we can weaponize it. And I use the word weaponize. We can weaponize it to change the policy on the fly, to block Google Docs just like that, if there's a change in behavior. So it can be done, but you need to understand that when you buy technology, you must be prepared to buy technology that can be integrated. It's 250,000 users. And they've been using our DLP for a long time, but they bought our behavioral analytics and they ran a pilot for 1,000 users. In that pilot, they found within 1 week that a GDPR incident was stopped. Literally stopped before the data left. And the CIO was immediately able to use that to go to the board of directors and ask for budget because it was clear that if they'd been breached, it would have been hundreds of millions in fines.
Processes to bind it all. So for the human behavior aspect, how well is it binding with the rest of the stuff in your whole package?
The behavioral technology is designed, we patented something called ERS. ERS is, it's called Entity Risk Score. And basically the ERS is the bridge between behavioral analytics and the technology. So what the ERS does is it's the algorithm that gives you a score of a human being or an entity on the network.
Yeah.
And we call it entity risk score because the entity could be a printer, it could be an air conditioning machine, it could be a process controller, it could be a valve switch. And you want to watch for those kind of things behaving badly. Target was attacked through the
Yes.
air conditioning system, right? So if that entity had been monitored, had it gone to the point of sale system, it should have been blocked immediately because its behavior changed.
Yeah.
So the ERS is a scoring system from 0 to 100, and that scoring system will then take into account the number of factors, which country you're in, which department you're in, your normal behavior, and if that deviates from a set median, the score will change over time. And as your score goes up, it will then enforce thresholds. Okay, so you get to a score of 30,